rand fell to its lowest level this year, as a dispute within the ranks of the ruling African National Congress Party over the mandate of the central bank weakened the currency. It was just over 0.5% weak, in fact, to just over 15 rand to the dollar. That is the first time that the rand has been there since October 2018. Now, for the most part, the latest turbulence has been triggered by a very public internal squabble within the ANC on the central bank's mandate and whether or not it should be expanded to include a focus on jobs and growth. Early in the week, grim data indicated the country's economy had actually contracted by 3.2% in the first quarter. In response to calls for a change in mandates, the South African Reserve Bank has reiterated yet again that its focus remains firmly on price stability as laid out in the Constitution. Right then, quite a bit to get through in this particular topic, so let's get you some analysis on it. Langa Madonko is the investment principal at Summit Africa, where he handles capital raising and investor relations. He joins us now live from Johannesburg. Good to see you, Langa. So the rand slamming into a new low today, just over 15 rand to the dollar. What other reactions are you seeing in the markets?
Good evening, Rama. I think that was the most significant reaction that we have seen in the market today. And I think it was the volatility of the rand is a fable that is well told, and we know how global sentiment affects it, and it's one of the most volatile currencies. I think, however, in the rest of the market, everybody in the local economy anyway has taken a view that the Minister of Finance is the Minister of Finance, and the stance of the ruling party is the stance of the ruling party, and we're hoping that there will be a separation between the sentiment of the party and the direction in which the government will act under the auspices of National Treasury.
Right, but 2 years ago, the ANC was calling for the nationalization outright of the central bank. Now, today, it's a totally different story. They're calling for change in mandates. I mean, given the fact that there's so many other pressing problems to be solved in South Africa's economy, why is the ANC so focused, so obsessed with the Reserve Bank?
I think part of it is there needs to be a greater understanding, and I think it's one of the things the minister has been at pains to do, of what the mandate of the SARB is and what it actually can do. And I think we are actually facing a real crisis in South Africa in terms of the issues that the Secretary General of the ANC put forward in terms of unemployment, in terms of how to grow the economy. And I think we are at a point where the rhetoric coming out of the ruling party is more one where, if that is the sentiment shared by the Secretary General, is the sentiment of the ruling party, because we both know that Ino Kotongwane, the head of policy development in the ANC, and the minister both came out saying, look, that's not the stance that we are adopting. But it feels more like a throw the kitchen sink at it approach. Let's see what eventually works. We probably run out of levers. And I think it will need that the government of the day come up with more creative solutions, and that the ANC start to rethink some of the gears and the levers that they can pull to resuscitate the economy. I'm not exactly sure that the SARB is one of those levers, but you know, the discourse needs to be as wide and as broad as possible to actually find a solution to stimulating the economy. There's a role for government, there's a role for political parties, there's a role for business, and everybody who's in the South African economy needs to put their hands to the pump. I also do share the sentiment that there are more pressing issues rather than the nationalization or the change in mandate of the SARB, and those are the things that we need to be fixing. But let's not ignore any channel from the discourse.
Right. That being said, though, because going back to the central, the Secretary General's rather comments, Ace Magashule, so he's calling for the SARB's mandates to be expanded to include growth and unemployment. But strictly speaking, unemployment is more of a fiscal policy function. It's about taxation. It's about regulation. There's nothing the central bank, strictly speaking, can do about either of those two issues, at least not directly. So, I mean, again, why this focus when presumably the ANC knows that what they're suggesting is simply not realistic?
I think you have to then look at how broad a school the ANC is. and the different schools of thought that would be in any panel or discussion. And while you'll have your economists, you will also have other people who come from other corners and other walks of life. And as I said, I think it's more of a conversation that is emanating from everyone saying, look, what do we know and what levers can we pull? And you're right. I think it's a function of the fiscus in terms of how we're going to stimulate growth. I think somewhere in the statement that the Secretary General put across, he made mention of using quantitative easing as a tool for potentially dealing with the issues. And it's a known fact that when the US was on the brink, quantitative easing was a tool that they used. But the circumstances under which South Africa finds itself right now are nowhere close to what the US was at. The US at the time had, I think, a -1 inflation level, and we are at about 6.5. So we don't even have the luxury of absorbing any inflationary pressure that would come in from introducing new currency. I think we also don't have enough investable government bonds to be able to buy back from the market to allow this currency to come in. And these are some of the considerations that obviously the Treasury and the SARB will be taking into consideration. But from a political standpoint, I think there is pressure to address the social elements of the economy. And everybody is fully aware of the debt burden that Eskom poses on the fiscus, the lowering revenue collection by SARS. And I think the solution is one that is being put into the public domain more on a socio-political rather than an economic perspective.
Right. One last question for you. There are, we both agree on this, there are far more pressing problems to deal with, ranging from reforming or breaking up Eskom, if you're that school of thought, or privatizing some or all of the SOEs that are not performing, like SAA. You've got labor reform issues. So in that context, isn't this focus on the Reserve Bank unnecessary distraction? Because here we are talking about what the ANC said about the central bank. We're not talking about what the ANC should be doing to actually deal with those SOEs that are a drag on South African taxpayers.
I think as a South African involved in business in the country, as well as if I were the Minister of Finance, I think my focus would definitely be on how do we turn around those SOEs and how do we boost revenue collection and how do we find a solution to the challenges that have beset Eskom. And I think we then have to come to a point where we must say that there is the ANC, but then there's the government of the day. The ANC is the political party with the largest number of parliamentarians, and therefore it has appointed the president. But he has appointed a cabinet who do not necessarily serve the interests of just the ANC, but the interests of South Africa. And therefore they must act prudently and always look to be focusing their lens on what is best suited to take the country forward. I think the Minister of Finance, as well as the head of the economic policy team at the ANC, have come out to say, look, this is not the policy of government. And I think as investors, we need to take our cue on where the government is going from the government rather than purely from the ANC as a political party.
Indeed. We leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your insights. Lange Madonka there from Summit.